There's a sentence that God hears more than almost any other prayer. It's not, "Thank you." It's not, "Please forgive me." It's 5 words that come out broken, usually at 2 in the morning, usually through tears. God, I don't know what to do. If you've ever whispered that, stay with me for the next few minutes. Because there's a man in Scripture who prayed those exact words in front of his entire nation, with an army already marching toward him. And what he did next is something almost nobody talks about. But before I tell you who he was, I want to ask you something. When you don't know what to do, what do you actually do first? Do you search for another opinion? Make another list? Lie awake, running through every possible outcome? Or do you just freeze? I've noticed something strange about confusion. It makes us feel productive while we're drowning in it. We think, we analyze, we replay conversations we can't change, we rehearse futures that haven't happened yet. And somewhere in all that thinking, we quietly convince ourselves that if we just think hard enough, clarity will show up. Sometimes it does, but most of the time, all we get is exhausted. At 60 years old, I've finally learned the difference between thinking and trusting. For years, I confused the two. I believed that if I could just understand everything, peace would follow. I was wrong about the order. Peace doesn't always come after understanding. Sometimes understanding only comes after trust. And that's a hard thing for someone like me to accept, because I like plans. I like certainty. I like seeing the whole staircase before I take the first step. Maybe you're the same. But life almost never shows us the whole staircase. And that's exactly where faith begins. Now, the story I mentioned, it's one of my favorites in the entire Old Testament, and not because it starts with confidence. It starts with terror. The man's name was Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. One morning, messengers ran into his palace with news no king wants to hear. Not one enemy army, not 2, several armies, moving toward him at once, and there wasn't time to raise a force big enough to stop them. Imagine standing there. Every option you have suddenly looks too small. And here's what I love about this story. The Bible doesn't pretend Jehoshaphat was calm. It tells us the truth. He was afraid. Genuinely, physically afraid. I find that oddly comforting. We like to imagine people in the Bible were fearless. They weren't. They just knew where to take their fear. Jehoshaphat didn't gather his generals and fake a battle plan he didn't have. He didn't pretend to be in control. Instead, he did something that changed the entire direction of the story. He prayed. And what he said next is, to this day, one of the most honest sentences ever recorded in Scripture. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. Read that again. Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, God, I've got this. He doesn't say, I understand your plan. He says, plainly, we don't know what to do. And then, almost in the same breath, but our eyes are on you. Not because the armies vanished, not because the danger disappeared, but because he remembered where to look before he knew where to walk. And that's the part I think most of us have backwards. We wait until we know exactly what to do before we turn to God. What if he's actually inviting us to turn to him first, before we know anything at all? That's a completely different way of living. One waits for certainty before trusting. The other trusts before certainty ever shows up. Now, real quick, if this is landing with you, hit like and subscribe, because every week we dig into moments like this, where ordinary people faced impossible situations and found something on the other side of them. And what I'm about to tell you next is the thing that actually changed how I pray when I'm scared. Because for years, I thought my biggest problem was not knowing what to do. I was wrong about that too. My biggest problem was never the not knowing. It was where my eyes went while I was trying to figure it out. One day, I was reading Jehoshaphat's prayer again, and it stopped being a nice verse and started being a question. It was like God quietly asked me, "George, when life gets confusing, where do your eyes go first? Not your physical eyes, your attention, your hope, your trust. Do they run to the news? To 100 opinions? To worst-case scenarios playing on a loop in your head? Or do they turn to me first?" That question sat with me for days, because if I'm honest, there have been long seasons where my eyes ran everywhere except toward God. I still believed, I still prayed, but He'd quietly become my last conversation instead of my first. Maybe that's what confusion really does. It sends us searching everywhere until we're too tired to do anything but finally sit still and listen. Think about Moses for a second. Standing at the edge of the Red Sea, an army behind him, the water in front of him, thousands of frightened people watching him for an answer he didn't have. Do you think he knew what to do? I don't think he did either. But before God opened that sea, He didn't hand Moses a plan. He asked him to trust first. The miracle didn't begin with understanding. It began with obedience. That pattern doesn't stop there. Abraham didn't know where he was going. Noah didn't fully understand why he was building a boat on dry land. Peter had no explanation for how a man could walk on water. Over and over, God asks people to trust Him before He explains Himself. That's uncomfortable, especially for people who want the whole picture before they'll take a single step. But here's something I need you to hear, because it might be the reason you clicked on this video today. There's a story in John chapter 11 that used to confuse me deeply. Jesus gets word that his close friend Lazarus is dying. The message is simple. Lord, the one you love is sick. And Jesus doesn't move. He waits, on purpose. Put yourself in that house. You've prayed. You've sent word to the one person who could fix this, and nothing happens. Have you ever felt that? Like heaven went quiet right when you needed it to speak the loudest. I have. More than once. And if you're in that silence right now, I need you to hear this carefully. God's silence is not God's absence. Sometimes He's building something you can't see yet from where you're standing. Mary and Martha thought Jesus arrived too late. He knew He was arriving at exactly the right moment. How many times have I judged God's timing simply because it didn't match mine? More than I'd like to admit, if I'm being honest with you. Looking back over 60 years, I can see something now that was invisible while I was living through it. Some of the prayers I'm most grateful for today are the ones God didn't answer the way I asked. At the time, I called it disappointment. Years later, I called it protection. Same event, completely different word for it. That's what time does. It reveals what confusion hides. So here's where I've landed. Faith was never about always knowing what God is doing. Faith is trusting His character even when His timing makes no sense to you yet. Maybe today you're standing at your own Red Sea, or sitting in your own version of Joseph's prison, or waiting in a silence that feels like it's gone on too long. You keep asking, what should I do? Maybe God's asking a different question back. Where are your eyes? Because once your eyes are fixed on Him, the next step usually becomes far easier to see. Not because every answer suddenly appears, but because fear stops making all your decisions for you. One more thing before I let you go. When we're anxious, we usually want God to show us the entire road, every turn, every outcome. But Scripture almost never works that way. Psalm 119 says, "His word is a lamp to our feet, not a floodlight down the highway." a lamp, just enough light for the next step. Maybe that's on purpose, because if He showed us the whole road, we'd start trusting the map instead of trusting Him. So if today your prayer sounds exactly like, "God, I don't know what to do anymore," I'm not going to give you 5 easy steps, because I don't think that's what your heart is actually asking for. I'll give you the same prayer that carried a terrified king, a hesitant prophet, and 2 grieving sisters through the impossible. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you.
Before you go, has there ever been a season where you had absolutely no idea what to do, and only looking back did you realize God had been guiding you the entire time? Tell me in the comments. Someone scrolling through today, at their own 2 in the morning moment, might need to read exactly your story. Because faith was never about seeing the whole road. It's about knowing who's walking it with you. Walk with God.